Montreal, November 9th, 1997. The wrestling world changed forever in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. But the man at the center of that betrayal? He'd been telling us who he was all along. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He didn't need pyrotechnics or entrance music that shook the building. When Bret Hart stepped to a microphone, something different happened. The noise stopped, because everyone knew. This man didn't speak in character, he spoke his truth. And in wrestling, that's the most dangerous weapon of all. These are 5 quotes that didn't just define the Hitman, they revealed the soul of professional wrestling itself. Quote 1, "I'm the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be." Picture this, it's 1994, and wrestling is changing. Hulk Hogan's golden era is crumbling. The steroid trial has rocked the foundation of sports entertainment. Fans are hungry for something real, something they can believe in again. Into this void steps a man from Calgary, Alberta. No superhuman gimmick, no cartoon character persona, just a wrestler's wrestler who looks into the camera and makes a promise that sounds less like a boast and more like a prophecy. Standing in front of a simple WWF backdrop, Bret Hart delivered words that would define not just his career, but an entire generation's understanding of wrestling excellence. "I'm the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be." It wasn't screamed. It wasn't shouted over entrance music. It was stated. Like a fact. Like gravity. 3 simple phrases. Past, present, future. But listen closer, and you hear something deeper. This wasn't just confidence. This was a man drawing a line in the sand. The best there is. That's about right now, in this moment, in this ring. While others relied on politics or popularity, Bret was talking about pure ability. The best there was. That's respect for wrestling history, for his father Stu, for the Hart Dungeon, for everyone who came before and couldn't do what he could do. The best there ever will be. That's not arrogance. That's a challenge to everyone listening. Prove me wrong. See, Bret Hart grew up in a house where wrestling wasn't entertainment, it was religion. Stu Hart's basement, the legendary Hart Dungeon, wasn't a training facility. It was a temple where weakness went to die. While other wrestlers were learning to work the crowd, Bret was learning to stretch opponents until they begged for mercy. When he said he was the best, he wasn't selling tickets. He was stating his resume. This quote didn't just become a catchphrase, it became a standard. Every technical wrestler who came after had to measure themselves against those words. Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Daniel Bryan. They all chased the ghost of that promise, but more than that, it gave wrestling fans permission to care about wrestling again. In an era of cartoon characters and supernatural Undertakers, here was a man saying, "What if we just were really, really good at this?" Here's what gets me about this quote. Bret never had to take it back. 27 years later, you can still make the argument. 5-time WWF champion, technical perfection that's never been matched. And he said it before he proved it, which makes it either the greatest prediction in wrestling history or the most dangerous promise ever made. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. 9 words that captured the soul of a man who refused to settle for anything less than perfection. And maybe achieved it. Quote 2, "You turned on me." March 31st, 1997, Monday Night Raw. Bret Hart stands in the center of a wrestling ring in Syracuse, New York, and for the first time in his career, he's being booed. Not heel heat, not "we love to hate you" boos, real rejection, real anger. This is the same man these fans cheered for years, the same technical master who gave them classic after classic. But something has shifted in the wrestling landscape, and Bret Hart, the eternal good guy, is about to become something he never wanted to be, a villain. Standing in that ring, surrounded by hostile American fans, Bret Hart didn't deliver a scripted heel turn. He delivered a moment of raw, unfiltered heartbreak. "You turned on me." 4 words. But in those 4 words you could hear 20 years of loyalty being shattered in real time. Think about what Bret is really saying here. Not "I turned heel," not "I've changed," but "you turned on me." He's making the fans complicit in their own disappointment. This wasn't a man embracing villainy. This was a man who genuinely couldn't understand why being honorable, being technically excellent, being everything a wrestling hero should be, was no longer enough. The world was changing. Austin was stunning bosses, The Rock was raising eyebrows, and Bret Hart, the ultimate white meat babyface, was being left behind. Here's what makes this quote so powerful. It wasn't just kayfabe. Bret Hart really was feeling abandoned by fans who wanted edgier content, by a business that was moving toward entertainment over athletics, by a company that was slowly pushing him aside for younger, more controversial stars. His real-life contract negotiations were falling apart. His relationship with Shawn Michaels was deteriorating. And the fans, his fans, were cheering for the rattlesnake who flipped him off and stunned him senseless. This quote launched one of the most psychologically complex heel turns in wrestling history. Bret didn't become evil. He became self-righteous. He didn't embrace being bad. He embraced being right in a world that had gone wrong, and it worked. For the first time in wrestling history, a performer was simultaneously a heel and a face depending on geography. In America, he was the enemy. In Canada, he was still the hero. One quote had split his character across international lines. "What interests me about you turned on me is that Bret was absolutely right." The fans did turn on him, not because he got worse, but because they wanted something different. And instead of adapting, instead of changing his character to fit the times, Bret made the fans the villains of his story. That takes incredible conviction, or incredible stubbornness. "You turned on me." 4 words that captured the exact moment when wrestling's last true hero realized the world no longer wanted heroes. At least not his kind of hero. And maybe that said more about us than it did about him. Quote 3. America isn't the greatest country in the world anymore. Picture the most dangerous thing you can say in a wrestling ring in 1997. Not threats of violence, not personal attacks, but this: questioning American supremacy in front of 10,000 Americans who paid good money to cheer for their country. Most wrestlers who go the anti-American route play it safe. They talk about American food, American culture, American stereotypes, cheap heat, easy heat. Bret Hart didn't want easy, he wanted real, and real is dangerous. March 1997, Raw is war. Bret Hart looks directly into the camera and delivers a line that would get most wrestlers legitimately heat for the rest of their careers. America isn't the greatest country in the world anymore. Not America sucks, not Americans are stupid, but something far more cutting: America isn't what it used to be. And coming from a man who'd been America's wrestling hero for half a decade, that cut deep. This quote is surgical. Bret isn't saying America was never great, he's saying it's not great now. In 1997, that was a direct challenge to American exceptionalism at the height of the country's global dominance. But listen to the subtext. Bret's not just talking about countries, he's talking about values: honor versus attitude, respect versus rebellion. The America that used to cheer for technical excellence over rule-breaking stunners anymore is the key word. It suggests decline, moral decay, a fall from grace. And Bret Hart, the Canadian, is pointing it out to Americans who don't want to hear it. Here's what made this so effective. Bret Hart genuinely believed it. Growing up in Calgary, raised on Canadian values of politeness, respect, and technical excellence, watching American wrestling culture embrace chaos and disrespect. To him, this wasn't a heel promo. This was social commentary. The Hart family represented old-school wrestling values. Stu Hart's basement bred respect, discipline, technical mastery. The Attitude Era represented everything opposite to that. Stone Cold drinking beer and flipping off his boss wasn't just character work to Bret. It was symbolic of American moral decline. This quote generated nuclear heat, not wrestling heat, real heat. Fans threw garbage. Death threats followed. Bret Hart had crossed the line from wrestling villain to legitimate public enemy in certain American cities. But in Canada, in Europe, in places where anti-American sentiment was more acceptable, Bret became a bigger hero than ever. He'd successfully created the rarest thing in wrestling: legitimate international heel-face dynamics based on real geopolitical tensions. What's brilliant about this quote is its timing. 1997 America was at peak confidence, Cold War I, economy booming, cultural dominance worldwide. For a wrestler to stand up and say you're not as great as you think you are required incredible courage or incredible stupidity. And with Bret Hart, maybe both. America isn't the greatest country in the world anymore. In 1997, that was shocking heel heat. Today, that's Tuesday's political debate. Bret Hart wasn't just predicting his heel turn, he was predicting the next 20 to 5 years of American cultural discourse. Quote 4, "You don't deserve to wear that belt." Montreal, November 9, 1997. The match is over, but the real fight is just beginning. Cameras are rolling, but nobody knows if this is still a show or if something genuinely dangerous is about to happen. In the corner stands Shawn Michaels, holding a championship he didn't win fairly, and approaching him, with 20 years of frustration and betrayal boiling over, comes Bret Hart. Not the Hitman, not the character, the man. What happens next isn't wrestling. It's personal. Bret Hart looks at Shawn Michaels, his former friend, his greatest rival, the man who just stole his championship through corporate conspiracy, and delivers a line loaded with venom. "You don't deserve to wear that belt." In any other context, that's a standard wrestling insult. In this moment, it's the sound of kayfabe dying in real time. This quote captures everything toxic about the Hart-Michaels relationship. Not just professional rivalry, but personal disgust. Bret isn't saying Shawn can't wrestle. He's saying Shawn doesn't deserve to represent what that championship means. To Bret Hart, that WWF championship represented more than just a title. It represented wrestling royalty, technical excellence, and moral authority. Seeing it around the waist of someone he viewed as morally bankrupt, politically manipulative, and disrespectful to the business. That wasn't just losing a match. That was watching wrestling itself get corrupted. The Hart-Michaels feud was never really about wrestling. It was about two completely different philosophies of what wrestling should be. Bret represented the old guard, respect, tradition, earning your spot through technical ability. Shawn represented the new wave, charisma, politics, entertainment over athletics. Their real-life hatred was so intense that they couldn't be trusted in the same building together. When Bret says Shawn doesn't deserve the belt, he's not talking about one match. He's talking about everything Shawn represents that's wrong with the business. This quote, delivered in this moment, became symbolic of wrestling's transition from sport to sports entertainment. Bret Hart's words represented the death of the old guard, the moment when politics officially became more important than performance. And it was prophetic. The Attitude Era that followed was built on exactly the kind of moral ambiguity and entertainment over athletics approach that Bret Hart despised. His quote wasn't just about Shawn Michaels, it was about the future of wrestling itself. "You don't deserve to wear that belt" might be the most honest thing ever said in wrestling. Not because Shawn Michaels was a bad wrestler, he wasn't, but because it captured the exact moment when wrestling stopped being about who was the best and started being about who could play the game. And Bret Hart? He never learned to play games. Quote 5, "I believe in treating people with respect. I believe in honesty. I believe in wrestling." Calgary, Alberta, 2010. The Hart Dungeon sits quiet now. No more screams of pain from stretching sessions. No more sounds of bodies hitting the mat. The place where Bret Hart learned what wrestling meant stands empty, a monument to values that wrestling left behind. But in interviews, in documentaries, in quiet moments when cameras catch him off guard, Bret Hart still speaks about those values. Not as nostalgia, but as truth. As if somewhere, somehow, wrestling might remember what it used to be. Years removed from the Montreal Screwjob, years past his wrestling prime, Bret Hart sits down for an interview and delivers what might be his most important quote. Not angry, not bitter, but with the quiet conviction of a man who's seen wrestling's soul and refuses to forget it. "I believe in treating people with respect. I believe in honesty. I believe in wrestling." 3 beliefs. Simple words. But in the context of everything Bret Hart endured, they read like a manifesto. Break this down. I believe in treating people with respect. That's about the Hart family way. Stu Hart didn't just teach wrestling moves, he taught dignity. How to carry yourself. How to honor your opponents and your craft. I believe in honesty. After Montreal, after betrayal, after discovering that wrestling was built on lies and politics, Bret Hart still believes in truth. Still believes in calling things what they are. "I believe in wrestling, not sports entertainment, not entertainment. Wrestling, the pure form, the art, the craft that his father taught him in that basement in Calgary." By the time Bret delivers this quote, he's survived the Montreal Screwjob, his brother Owen's tragic death, career-ending concussions, and his own stroke. Wrestling took everything from him, his career, his family, his health, and yet here he is, still defending it, still believing in what it could be, rather than mourning what it became. That's not just loyalty, that's faith. Faith in something larger than his own experience. This quote became a rallying cry for wrestlers who still believe in the old ways. Daniel Bryan talking about being a wrestler, not a sports entertainer. CM Punk's straight-edge lifestyle. Jon Moxley choosing artistic integrity over corporate comfort. But more than that, It became a mission statement for anyone trying to preserve wrestling's soul in an era of corporate entertainment. A reminder that somewhere underneath all the storylines and production values, there's still an art form worth protecting. What gets me about this quote is that Bret Hart earned the right to be bitter. Wrestling screwed him over literally and figuratively, but instead of cynicism, he chose faith. Instead of abandoning the business that betrayed him, he chose to remember what it was supposed to be. That's not just admirable, that's heroic. I believe in treating people with respect. I believe in honesty. I believe in wrestling. In a business built on deception, from a man who was deceived more than most, these words ring like a bell. A reminder of what wrestling was, and what it still could be, if we're brave enough to believe. 5 quotes. 5 moments when Bret Hart looked into a camera or a crowd, and revealed not just his character, but his character. The man behind the Hitman. The values behind the villain. Bret Hart didn't have to yell to be heard. He didn't need catchphrases to be remembered. He just told his truth, sometimes angry, sometimes proud, sometimes heartbroken, but always honest. And maybe that's what made him dangerous. In a business built on working the audience, Bret Hart shot straight. In an industry that rewards playing politics, he played by principles. In a world that changed around him, he stayed exactly who he was. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. It wasn't just a promise about his wrestling ability. It was a promise about his integrity. And 27 years later, that promise still holds. Which Bret Hart quote hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, in wrestling, as in life, sometimes the most powerful words are the ones that come from the heart.